Days ago I was working with my rigid 3000 psi 2.6 gallons per minute pressure washer, and it was starting to surge. So I thought, well, this is a perfect opportunity to show what is causing that. So I'm going to turn my camera around and show you what I ran into and what I'm going to do to fix it. Okay, here is a small engine carburetor, and this is what I usually do. Now this isn't off of this machine right here, but it's got a sediment bowl right here, and this sediment bowl will get material, rust, you name it, caught in there, dirt, and you can rinse that out, clean out the ports up underneath of it. And sometimes you can take, well, I think most of the times you can take this bottom center bolt out of the bottom of the float bowl, and it has a gasket on it to keep it from leaking gas, and remove that, and it has a seal right up in here that keeps the gas from leaking out. And you got to be very careful because there's like a shelf around the outside edge of this, and the bolt will still go in, and you can end up bending that lip by tightening that up. So you got to make sure that that's centered on there. And the reason that they're surging is because usually, not always, but that it's starving for fuel. So somewhere along in here, dirt's gotten in or rust in places where it shouldn't be. Now this is the float pin, and here's the float, and on the bottom of that, a lot of times that needle seat is attached right to the float, and sometimes they're separate from one another. But you can remove that, and what that needle does is it goes up and down as it needs fuel. When this goes down, it says I need fuel. Well, it's pulling that needle away from the seat and bringing fuel down into that bowl to supply the carburetor. And what'll happen sometimes, there's a jet down in here, and that jet will get plugged with some of that debris that made its way through because maybe there was too much sediment in this bowl. And sometimes up in this area, you can remove this, and there'll be dirt in the on-off, and that'll plug gas from completely coming down into the carburetor float bowl. So if you take a carburetor cleaner with a thin needle tip and blow out all your different ports and passages in the carburetor, and in the venturi you will find little openings. Let's see, right there's a tiny one that you can blow through all these holes and clean off the outside of the carburetor. But that's not what I ran into. Let me show you what I ran into when I tore this carburetor off. Now this is the one that came off of here, and I went to take out the sediment bowl and it wouldn't come out, and I ruined it. So I thought to myself, I better get a carburetor ordered. But it's the same thing. You can take it apart, take the float bowl off, remove, now see that one, the pin doesn't want to come out. And maybe they made it that way so that it wasn't serviceable. But that sediment bowl, I thought to myself, well, if that thing is actually molded in there, how are you supposed to be able to clean this thing out? So I loosened these up and took this off the side of it. And if this is molded in here and it's like a little sediment bowl like this one, how in the heck are you going to get that clean? There's a small port here. I'm sure that we could probably take this on-off valve apart, and we could blow down through there. But in turn, how are we going to get all of the debris, the sediment, out of that sediment bowl? And this has got a little wavy washer on this to keep pressure against. I'm sure there's going to be O-rings on the back side of this thing. There's an O-ring there on the outside, and there's a little rubber with different portholes in it. This is ruined now, but we'll pull it out of there. Try to anyhow. And that's what seats up against that, and that sets over these two little nubs there, and then it switches from on to off. But sometimes those holes will get plugged up. So what I ended up doing was buying a complete new carburetor for this, and never going to try to pull out that sediment bowl again. But this one, this particular carburetor has lasted me a good 10, 12 plus years. So this $25 investment off of eBay or Amazon, one of the two, wasn't bad as far as keeping this thing running. I'm going to turn this thing around, put it on time lapse, and show you how I took the carburetor off without rotating the engine, and I'll show you why. Right there you can see the port that the carburetor goes to, and right out from the port is that darn pole. Now that's just a punch that's shoved in my fuel line, but if you have your stud in here, there's no way to get the carburetor off because it's going to run into that post. So when I put this back together, I have to put the carburetor on first, and then the gasket, make sure they're all in the right direction, put a little Loctite, a little blue, so it doesn't come off real hard. And you can see that I double nutted that stud so that I could unscrew it, and then I'm going to do just the same going back in. I'm going to leave that double nutted on there, put the carburetor and the gasket on correctly, and then screw it in using the double nut. Then I'll undo the double nut and pull everything up so that all the holes line up, and put the next stud in the same way. Here's one more thing before I start in that time-lapse section of the video. This is an insulator block that goes on before the carburetor. It goes against the head, but let me show you that how this particular one goes. And most of them have it, but that goes in there, and there's a gasket on each side of that to seal that. Now, this is another thing that can cause that surging. If you get air leaks into the intake port, and this is not completely sealed, then you can end up with that same surging problem. But I didn't see any air leaks on this one, so I'll scrape off this old gasket, put the new ones on, and then we'll get this carburetor installed with that insulator block. All right, it's the very next day. I've got the water hooked up, I've got the air bled out of it, and it's ready to start. This morning, earlier though, I had to run out to one of the small engine shops near me and pick up a piece of filter material to replace the one that was starting to rot away in that filter over the carburetor. But I'm going to turn the camera around and we'll start this thing up. It is a little cold-blooded. I have to run it for a minute or two with the choke partially on, but then we'll see if this thing surges. great. I'm real happy with that. Got rid of that surging. And one other thing I wanted to point out, before you go through all of that, make sure you've got gas in it, but then also on your gas cap, those are vented in order to allow air to get in, to allow the gas to escape out. You know, like on a gas can, you've got the vent in the back. Not a lot of the new ones you don't, but so that the gas can come out, you got to replace it with air. And that's the same with these. It has a very small vent in there in order to allow it to go down into the carburetor freely. So definitely make sure that, and also there's a filter in the tank that sometimes will get clogged up, will cause the same kind of surging that went through all this for. But I checked those ahead of time and that wasn't the issue. But hey, thanks for watching. If you would, please like and subscribe. Always enjoy the comments. Have a great day.